Hey, thank you. So this is a talk about Carrying the One Ring, lessons in leadership on Tales of the Shire. Tales of the Shire is a video game that Weta Workshop is currently making. It's about hobbits. It's a hobbit life sim, and it will be coming out March 25th next year. So yeah, let's get going. There are spoilers ahead, though. I feel like I do need to warn you that if you somehow haven't read or seen The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, this might somewhat ruin it for you, or maybe you'll just be very confused about all my references. And also, this is me talking, this isn't an ad, basically. This is not me talking as an evangelist for my company necessarily. This is me talking as a game dev about something that I'm working on that I'm very passionate about. It might, I guess, kind of end up also being an ad, but not intentionally, just because I really love what we're making. Quick intro. Hi, I'm Calliope. I'm the lead game producer on Tales of the Shire at Weta Workshop. Just quickly, it's that Weta Workshop, not Weta FX, not Weta Digi, not the other ones. I actually don't know. I can't actually tell them apart anymore. But we're the one with the swords and the costumes and stuff, not the one where you would expect us to be. So the first lesson, the biggest lesson, we kind of start at the end and then go to the beginning. The first lesson is that you need to look after yourself. So I'm going to start with a kind of rough story of what being completely crushed looks like, and then we'll work our way back to the Shire. So earlier this year, things were very stressful for me. The team was at its largest. I think we were sitting at around 55. And on full-time production staff, I only had myself and one other junior producer, as well as our off-site EP, who isn't in the room, so I'm going to talk so much smack about him. We were already pretty under-resourced, and we were actually hiring for more producers at the time. That junior producer took a month off to see family in China, which totally his right. He totally should have. not being sassy about that. But it meant that I was even more under-resourced. I'd also worked through the Christmas break prior to that, and I was like on the ground by myself, running the team, and all of us towards really big deadlines. We're also hiring a bunch of people, not just producers, and as you all know, interviews take up a lot of time, especially because they're one of the biggest risks to a team's safety and security. So you want to do that right. And then at the same time as all of this, the publishers came to visit from America. So they needed lots of time for meetings while they were in the country. And I didn't really know it at the time because I'd already been kind of ambiently burnt out for a while, but this was actually a bit of a breaking point for me. So one day in that week, the buzzing in my head got worse. I felt panic rising up in my chest. My eye was twitching, and I was like, okay, something's wrong. I need to leave. I need to go right now. I skipped out on a publisher dinner, which for someone who's kind of a weirdo who actually likes networking, likes hanging out with people outside of work, was unusual for me. I drove home, I didn't put on a podcast, I didn't put on any music, I knew I needed to focus, I ran a red light, I nearly got into, I think, 2 crashes. By the time I got home, I was like, just barely holding it together. So I came home, told my partner that I was like, I can't talk right now, I think I just need to sit. And he was very lovely about it, thank you, Emery. He sat me down on the couch and he went to go cook me dinner, which is a really nice and sweet thing to do. But just the noise of him banging pots and pans around, so like he was like bashing things. He was just very normally putting things around the kitchen, and then he put a YouTube video on the background, and just the sound of a YouTube video made my head explode. Like, I started crying, I was clamping pillows over my head. I've never had a reaction or an overstimulation reaction to sound before. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm quite a noisy person. I like to play music loud, I like to have friends over. I'm always bumping into things, so there's usually a string of curses following me wherever I walk. And so this was a really strange physical turning point for me where I had to look at myself and be like, okay, we've never seen ourselves like this before. We're going to need to make some adjustments. I'll skip forward a little bit so that we're in a slightly better place. Right after that point, we hired 3 more producers on staff, and my workload got significantly more manageable and things got a lot better. But yeah, that was the Mordor point for me. That was definitely the point of looking into the lava and being like, So this is a talk about lessons learned. I'm going to give you generic leadership advice. I'm sure that actually many of you in the room are much more equipped to do that than I am. And there's also lots of really good talks on them already. This is about what I did well and what I learned from not doing things well. And unexpected lessons are everywhere if you look closely enough. So the challenge was bring Tales of the Shire to life. Things to freak out about. I love freaking out. The IP, Lord of the Rings, has a very enthusiastic fan base, which includes me. You know, I grew up with Lord of the Rings as sort of part of our national identity, as well as being a massive nerd. So this was a really personal IP for me. Weta Workshop's reputation. So 30 years of creative excellence and over 30 awards, including several BAFTAs and Academy Awards. That's our CEO. He's a literal knight. And there's lots and lots and lots of those kinds of awards that just loom over you in meeting rooms. Imposter syndrome is a hell of a thing. And there's also really complex stakeholder dynamics. So we had Middle-earth, we had Private Division, our publisher, we had Private Division's parent company, and we had Weta Workshop. But once I got there, I realized that there was a bit more to it. There were more things to freak out about. So about a week in, I realized that this was a much bigger project than I or the team expected. Greenlight was looming in 30 days, so we didn't actually have a signed contract yet. We didn't actually have money yet to make this game. None of it was a done deal. There was lots of hiring to do over a pretty short period, and a time when hiring in New Zealand was really challenging. This was 2022, and we're still in the boom, so it was really hard to find talent anywhere, especially when you live in the middle of nowhere. And it was Weta Workshop's first commercial game for mass consumption with a standard shipping process. So previous forays were really cutting-edge experiences with Magic Leap. This was different and is a path that many more developers have usually trodden. And a pretty ambitious timeline. It would be extended, thank God. But also no one above me had shipped games before. So you're on your own, kid. I'm but a small hobbit. This is one hell of a ring to carry to Mordor. So problem one was get money. A game had been promised to the publisher, but for way less time and budget than the game required. There was less than a month until the greenlight deadline, at which point the publisher would decide if we'd get the contract. It was impossible to deliver the original promise, and we needed to present an alternative plan to the publisher before greenlight in order to get their buy-in. Basically, no, the eagle could not just fly the ring to Mordor. We needed to plot another path. Providing clear options to stakeholders as early as you can gives them agency and buy-in on these decisions, especially if you're on the back foot. Here's one lesson. I started to actually number the lessons as I went, but then there's too many numbers and they started to sort of combine into each other, so I'm just going to be like, a lesson. You can still steer this in your preferred direction though. So this is what I actually did well. This is a lesson that I'm like, yeah, no, confirmed, good. We roadmapped and scoped out all of the desired features with the leads. That resulted in a game that would have taken us over 5 years to make, so no. I sat down with the lead designer, and we came up with 3 versions of the game with 3 roadmaps. All of them were scoped. The intention was to persuade for the biggest version while protecting ourselves if that wasn't going to be viable. So we had 3 versions that we pitched, which was the core, which honoured the original time and budget, but cut down many of the features and was sort of like a Hobbit homestead kind of game. Still really cute. I'd still play it, but much smaller in scope. Then the next one we called the augmented core, which included some features that we had cut out of the first one, like fishing and cooking. And then we had Bywater, which was the closest to the original desire of the game that we wanted to make. It's also closest to the final product. And that included having most of the features back in, but it was still actually smaller than the original promise, while coming in at a lot more budget and with as much extra time as I could reasonably push for. I was pretty hamstrung by not already having established a really good relationship with the publishers, meaning that I had to tread pretty carefully in order to get their trust while also being like, hi, I'm new, can I please have more money and more time? Thanks. Thank you. So, a lesson was to assess the playing field and think outside the box. All that is gold is not glitter. Sometimes you need to find allies in unexpected places, like an army of the dead. Starting scene, so this was their team in 2022. We're now called Game Studio, but we were called Interactive. We had 2 designers. One of them was brand new, started at the same time as me. We had 2 UX, we had 5 programmers, but only 1 senior. We had no lead programmer. We had 1 animator, 1 rigger. We had lots of expertise in leadership. Like, the people in our leadership team had come from, like, working on The Hobbit very recently, or like, they'd all basically been legends in their career for a long time. But this was still a first-time experience for them. A tough hiring landscape, as I mentioned, no signed deal, and a heap of very talented artists and lots of other interesting resources around. Like, it's a pretty tricky problem when your homeland is so far away from everything except for, like, the east coast of Australia, which is why we've stolen so many Australians. So, one of the ways that I worked around some of these problems was to find homes for diverse or unique skill sets and solutions. What do you currently have that you could maybe use differently or twist to your advantage? Is there a problem that you've been rigid on? Maybe there's another solution to it. Can you look at it from a different angle and think of an unusual solution? Focus on what you've got, not what you're missing. And of course I had to add a Gandalf quote in there. Look at all these guys with their very diverse skill sets and skills. All right, so what else do we have access to? There's a lot of words. I'm not expecting you to actually retain any of this, but we had props. We had 3D departments. We had sculptors, we had tinkerers, we had crafters, we had builders, we had a costume department, we had a merch production and a merch design department. We had a whole department for concept art. And we had graphic designers, we had an armory, we had swordsmiths, we had a media production and filming facilities, we had Park Road post-production, which is a state-of-the-art post-production studio just down the road from us. Kind of looks like a lodge. It's pretty cool. We had robotics and animatronic engineers. We had marketers. We had lots of big, hairy feet prosthetics. We had researchers. We had lore expertise. We had storytellers. We had musicians and composers, sometimes, whenever they were on another project. We had a big name as Weta Workshop, and much, much more. I'm going to assume that most game studios don't have access to all of these things. So, this really came into effect with our Greenlight video, which was the way that we got our funding. We utilised the art resources that we had to make beautiful vignettes in Engine that showcased how magical we wanted to make landscape corners of the Shire. That was one of our strengths. So we went really hard out on making gorgeous environments that made the viewer want to jump into the Shire. We utilised our costume and media production department and any available camera or director who put their hand up to make a video of us dressed as hobbits, making games in a local community garden by way of selling ourselves as a team. We took PowerPoint to the very edge of its capacity, I'm pretty sure, with an incredible graphic designer who made the most beautiful and animated pitch deck I've ever seen. We borrowed a composer who was working with Weta Workshop on other projects, and we sent out a message to everyone at Workshop and asked if they would voice act for us. Some of these voices were used, we used Park Road Post to record them, and some of them were used to voice our early prototypes. It was very silly, it was very well done, and it was very sweet. I've only included a few photographs here, but we were literally painting on old monitors. Our VFX department was like little puppets with smoke. So I think it's actually someone like vaping and blowing at it in the background. That's the smoke effect. And yeah, there was lots of ingenuity in this, and this is just a community garden in Miramar. It's me. So result. The intro video of all the team pottering out in the garden was so unique and special that it made the key decision maker when we were pitching, who is a notoriously hard nut to crack apparently, smile. We did learn that had never happened before. I hope he's okay. We got greenlit. Obviously, I feel like that was sort of spoiled by the beginning. Here's another example of us finding homes for diverse or unique skill sets. We often leaned on listed resources before to augment our work. So one very unique and memorable occasion was sending our artists and animators over to the Forge to watch one of our blacksmiths, Chris Menges, in action. He took us through these specific types of hammers that someone in the rough century that a dwarf would use, what kind of movement they would use, how they would conserve energy, what tricks they would do. I kind of wanted to put a video of him like flipping hammers in here, but then I think there's like some stuff that I couldn't quite control that you're not allowed to see, so here's where we are. And that's Neppy, our dwarf, who ended up with all the animations that are based off Chris. Another finding a home for diverse and unique skills was our in-game voices now, apart from that first one we did, our actual in-game voices in the actual finished game are mostly just volunteers of voices from around the workshop. So every department chipped in. A couple of them we flew down from Auckland from Unleashed, and they are immortalised in our game as our characters. I think you can see Noni, Darren, Nikki. Yeah, it was a very homegrown team effort. Leveraging allies and mentors. So similar to rethinking how you can use skills around you, lean on people around you whenever you can. Utilize the skills of allies and mentors however you best see fit. So this looked like accessing Sir Richard Taylor, I should say, sorry, as a key consult for things like art, trailers, key art especially, trailers, concept art, and lore. This is not asking him for feedback on specific game mechanics, where his time is less valuable, and honestly, we would get much less out of it. We borrowed a researcher from the location-based experience department, who was a professor of Tolkien at Oxford, which he still does, and now his other job is writing on Tales of the Shire, and has been for the last 3 years. We hire consultants and services wherever possible for areas that we didn't have expertise in, so diversity, user testing, that kind of thing. We asked fellow studios who are working in similar engines with similar systems how they had worked through technical problems that we were experiencing. And we working on the in-world history with Dan Falconer and Richard Taylor. So Dan has been living in and designing Middle-earth for, I think, 20 years or so. He's a bit of a legend, and having being able to just bring him into a meeting room and talk through the history of the tribes of the hobbits and how that was going to influence the different physical characteristics that we had was very, very cool. So we did deep dives into that's the mill at Sarehole where Tolkien grew up, and that I said the formatting screwed it a bit. It's fine. Tolkien said that the Shire was very much based on his childhood in rural Warwickshire, and being able to go through those images and really flesh out the lore in a way that we wanted to take this IP forward into the future was really special. More diverse skill sets and allies and mentors. So look at me doubling up my points. For our teaser trailer, we decided to do a kind of risky thing, unless you're making a mobile game, in which case anything goes, I swear, whatever ads. I don't understand the correlation between the ad and the mobile game at all. But we made a live action trailer for a very not live action video game. We used our swordsmiths, we used builders, we used leatherworkers, we used any available crafty folk we had to hand, and we built a beautiful hobbit set inside the workshop in our photography room. We borrowed someone with soft curly brown hair, because very hobbity, from another department to be our actor. We clothed them in available cozy items from their wardrobe and the costume department. We created physical effects with fish string and Genius from the Forge. We had specialist props made, so that little scarecrow guy, I think you can kind of see him, that left one. He was made by someone's wife. I'm so sorry, I don't remember her name. I don't actually know that I met her. But it was just a real team effort of a community coming together to make this space in a really short amount of time. The book was created by one of the best leatherworkers in the world over a couple of days. And we leveraged, obviously, the baddest mentor of them all, Sir Richard Taylor, to give feedback and expertise in the best place that we could use them, which is film. Around this point, we actually lost our lead designer too. We were down to only one more junior side designer. It's really hard to advocate for the game design at this point. So I guess one point that I want to give you to take away is always look for advocates for disciplines and check to see where some voices may be crowding out equally important voices, and how that has created an unbalanced dynamic with what's important in the game. So can you leverage allies or mentors to help bolster any area that may be failing or falling? Our tiny two-person design team could not tank this, so we needed another solution. Sometimes you need to look outside the immediate vicinity. Who in your local-ish community can rise to the occasion? In our case, it was Morgan Jaffett, and that is definitely accurately real footage of Morgan when he first arrived. But yeah, once we had a strong senior voice who could advocate from a game design value background, because we obviously had the visual and the lore side pretty well covered, things began to balance out again. Here's what I would recommend not doing. Don't wait till you have everything figured out before asking for help. Don't be too proud to admit when you don't know the best way forward. Don't write people off because they don't have the exact experience you need. Where do their strengths complement what you're trying to build? Is there a way that you can bring them in to help anyway? And don't be passive. Take all available action within your control to plug knowledge gaps and source experts to advise on issues. Caveat though, that only works if you actually listen to them. Building credibility and trust. So one of the most challenging things about an environment where you're a newcomer, owning a product that the company's never built before, is building trust. It's also the most important. I'll let you look at his face again. Outrage. So these are my particular problems, but you will have your own. I was a newcomer amongst 20-plus year veterans, just not veterans in games. I was a young woman. Games and tech in general, I would say, is a younger industry than film. Games is also less hierarchical than film, I say, knowing that I'm making a few generalizations. Big unknown needs, and we have a shared language that means different things to the existing industry that the company worked in. So obviously, for example, our design department at Weta Workshop means concept art, and when we talk about design, we're talking about like spreadsheets. Very different use cases, same words, same thing with producer, same thing with so many other things. So it's almost like when you have a shared language that is really close to each other, it means different things. It's actually harder to communicate without more just misunderstandings. So building trust with the publisher was actually a bit easier because we shared similar circles and language and they knew my track record. How do you build trust when the very esteemed and experienced people in their field above you don't know what a good job looks like in your field? I'm still looking for tips on this, by the way. But here's what I've got so far. Demonstrate expertise through small, impactful wins. Provide proven solutions with demonstrable research. Demonstrate reliability by following through on your promises, no matter how small. Actually, yeah, keep your word is kind of the main point of all of this. Provide a solid base for your team to lean on. Listen to feedback from everywhere, but be selective about how and when to apply it based on your expertise. Find common ground in any way that you can, just not common ground where you don't understand what you're saying. If you both go, yeah. Like, make sure you're actually hitting the point. And cover your ass. So document every decision and meeting, be able to call upon it when required. And for your team loyalty, show in your words and deeds that you're dedicated to the team, that you have their backs. That means not narking on them, or pointing the finger at them, or blaming them. So, positive example of how I did this, I took full responsibility on milestone deliveries, always. That led to a lead saying, I never have to worry about milestones, I know Cal always has it under control. A negative version is that the risks that I had registered and reported but were dismissed did come to fruition, which led to delays. So while the outcome was really crappy, the positive part was that it actually resulted in a gained ally, which enabled us to actually end up quickly hiring in a time when we were like getting pretty close to not being able to go forward. So kind of crappy experience, but positive outcome in the end. For building credibility and trust, don't be worm-tongue, please. So do not lie or misdirect. Pushing problems down the pipeline by pretending they don't exist will set you up for failure. Don't store information that would best be shared. So this is something that I would do with good intentions, with bad results. Whenever you can, be transparent, but obviously mind your tone. Don't over-umbrella. So as a producer, we want to shield the team from a lot of the stressful stuff that's going on in the background. I have over-shielded the team to the point where they weren't aware that we were in a bad position, which could lead to feature cuts that they really cared about. The team needs to know when it's raining. They need to not be getting wet. So they need to understand the context, but they need to not be so stressed out by it that they're immobilized and start making bad, stressed out people decisions, because they need to make the game. Communicating with impact is really important in leadership, which is something that I have learned the hard way. Include the team in the decisions that they're closest to. Even if you don't end up taking their advice, just bring them along for the ride will make a hell of a difference in getting them on board and getting their buy-in. Shielding is a double-edged sword. So as with the umbrella note, sometimes the team needs to know when the water is getting a little hot. If you've had their backs, they will have yours, and they'll put their heads down to focus on key areas. Menu, not the recipe. So, as someone who is always over-verbose and obviously always writes too much, this is like a really hard one for me, but I'm getting better at it. While we should be as transparent as we can, not all information is useful or helpful when providing context to an unhappy customer on a decision that they didn't like. So, communicating with impact on leadership, this is how the menu, not the recipe, impacted me negatively when I did it wrong. So what I was doing was I was building a case as to why my point was valid. So I would prelude my point with various contributing factors and elements to consider to show that I'd really analysed the issue. I would usually get interrupted before I'd even gotten halfway to making my point. And someone would interject to add either support to a point that I wasn't actually making, which meant that I needed to go back and sort of reiterate, which sort of threw me off, or people would cut me off to argue that I was wrong about a point that I wasn't even making yet because they were assuming what I was going to say or where I was going with all of this. So I would leave these meetings feeling frustrated, unheard, misunderstood or belittled. Start with the important point, then elaborate. If you're asked, if you need to. Sorry, horrible project, well, not even project manager, just manager language. OKRs, objectives and key results. A great way to ensure that the team understands what they're doing and how what they're doing feeds into the overall goals. I don't think that you need to follow a specific framework, but the important part to bear in mind is that the team does best when they understand the whys of what they're doing. If you as a leader cannot give them a good answer as to why they need to do X or Y, and it's not immediately clear, they won't do it no matter how much you ask. Or they'll do it when you follow up, or they'll do it and then they'll fall off next week. So people need to understand how their corner of work contributes to the overall goal and the overall picture, because this makes their work, no matter what it is, meaningful. People also need to understand and take up the banner of the shared vision of the studio and the product, and they can't do that if they're not on the same page as you and they don't understand why. OKRs/KPIs. KPIs are generally set up by leadership, and they're sort of more about performance and leadership down, whereas OKRs are meant to be more team up. More bottom up and communicate what you want to accomplish specifically. Here's just an example. So Tales of the Shire is a Middle-earth game centred around being quintessentially hobbity. Hobbits are small, gentle, rural folk, right? They do not roam. They don't trust anything past the Shire's borders. Frodo and Bilbo are standout hobbits because they dare to venture out in a very un-hobbit-like way, or they get bullied by a wizard. I don't know, up to you. But they venture out to protect a home they love so much. This artist, when he suggested putting the Battle of Bywater into the game, wasn't telling us that he wasn't intelligent or talented or anything like that. It indicated that he understood the lore really well. He understood Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit really well. He didn't understand the game's audience, though, or the genre requirements. He also didn't understand what the goal was of us creating Tales of the Shire and why that was different from any other Middle-earth grimdark game that has been made, because there's lots of great Lord of the Rings games that have already been made. If he had been aligned with us, we could have used his creativity much better. So the creativity in the Battle of the Bywater idea he proposed could have been something that was actually really useful and really brought out the best of the game if he had been on board and understood the vision. So that's on us, because we didn't do that well. Even the most mundane and boring tasks should be there because they contribute to a wider picture of necessity. I'm going to bring up the favourite producer example of moving your Jira cards, or I'll fight you. Move your Jira cards, right? This is pretty boring, no one wants to do this, but even with something as lame as that, you can say, look, moving your Jira cards leads to better project data, leads to milestone achievements, leads to us getting paid, leads to you getting paid. So your salary directly needs you to move your damn Jira cards over, please. If you as a leader cannot think of a way that even a small and boring task contributes to the overall goal, don't expect people to do it, and also maybe just get rid of it. Why are you doing that? And of course, even Sam, understood that even on the trip to Mordor, you got to season your food. So there's a whole lot of there's really unsexy things that have a huge impact on the wider picture. Simplicity of process. As a producer, I love my processes. I am always tempted to over-process to protect myself so that I don't need to be following up on things and there's less stuff to hold in my brain. But what I learned in this project was that you should avoid the temptation to over-process or develop extra processes as the way to solve every single problem that occurs. To quote scrum.org, consistency reduces complexity. Avoid compounding processes. They'll become noise, your team will forget, and they'll become disinterested. You'll also be run ragged by trying to keep on their backs and follow up. Another thing to keep in mind is to avoid introducing new cadences where possible as well, or restrict them to significant milestones or occasions so that it feels like, one chapter's closed, the next one's begun, we're changing the way we're doing this now. Don't adjust process until you've carefully observed what is currently going on. Just take a bit. Don't jump in. Just wait, watch, learn. This is really important if it's a reactive change. If it's an individual issue, try to find the source and fix the individual issue. You don't need to impact the entire team just because a mistake has happened to one person once. If the same problem occurs multiple times, then you've got a pattern. So note the pattern and then implement changes or processes to fix that pattern. Never assume you're on the same page. These guys did. That's the thing. Never assume you're on the same page. With different languages, as I discussed before, comes pretty easy miscommunication because our industries have different meanings for the same words. Recap decisions and problems at the end of every meeting. Find out who is the real decision maker in the room. I ended up spending a lot of time trying to persuade someone who appeared to be the decision maker. This happened multiple times. This is about multiple people, actually. And I was really confused that nothing was happening and why nothing was being actioned because I felt like they were on board with me and then would just kind of disappear into the mists. But once I paid attention to the politics, I realized that I was petitioning someone who was actually ill-equipped to petition on my behalf, so nothing was happening. Come prepared with data. Don't reinvent the wheel. So one tendency that I had to battle with quite a bit was the desire to treat every game dev problem like it was the first game that was ever made, and this is the first time this problem has ever been encountered by anybody. Obviously, we make better games where we can just learn from other people's mistakes and skip some of that learning process. We don't need to learn things that we've already found out in the 80s. Bypass this where possible by doing your homework on how issues have already been resolved and then presenting that or presenting multiple options that have worked for other people. And develop Veracity. Ensure that you have in writing who is responsible, accountable, supporting, consulted, informed. You also don't need to have the S if your team is smaller. Circulate this company and stakeholder-wide, even to people that you think may not be necessary. This is especially important when you have a complex company and stakeholder dynamics. When the trailer went out, when our first announcement trailer went out, or the teaser, I had a person that I think I'd only seen in passing run over, really upset that they hadn't been consulted about the trailer and why they hadn't been involved. And my genuine reaction was like, I'm so sorry, who are you? What's your name again? That was my genuine reaction. I had no idea that there was an extra layer of stakeholders that branched out rather than just being up my chain of command. And I was so much more concerned with how the external stakeholders felt about things and making sure that I got all of them on board that it never occurred to me to look outside of my own line in Weta Workshop and realise that there's actually lots of creative directors that need to be involved that I didn't know about, didn't know existed. There's lots of different areas that I now know that I need to include and get approval from before something happens. And so there's a marked decrease in burst-ins where people come and yell at me for not talking to them first when I didn't know who they were. And learning to navigate organisational politics was really critical for me, and I did not do this well. I kind of just assumed that I didn't really need to worry about it. You can hate it, but unfortunately, if it's embedded in your company culture, your project may live or die based on your ability to correctly read the room. I naively assumed that if I did my job well, and everyone around me would just trust me, and that, I'd be looked upon favourably, and when I needed things, when Tales of the Shire needed things, we would get those things. Not so. Never assume you're on the same page. Call back. So ask yourself these specific questions. How does your organisation or a specific organisation get things done? Who do people go to when they need to get a magic wand waved? What speed are different issues resolved at? Why? What are the lingering things that no one seems to be able to solve or change? Why? You'll find that there is a lot of blockers and that there's a lot of individuals and places who can really help you if you get them on board. Learn who you need to get on side in order to be successful. I really like this artist, Ryder. As a producer, my success looks like the team's success. So if I'm unable to effectively advocate for what the team needs to the correct person, we all fail. This is especially important to learn if you're competing for resources with a wider pool. The charismatic squeaky wheel with a well-understood issue will get those resources in rooms that you're not even aware of if you haven't figured out who to go to. And that sucks. Understand your position. How does your status impact the conversation that you're having, both up and down? So gender, perceived gender, plays a pretty big role in this. You can morally disagree with this. I mean, obviously I do, because I'm a woman. And you can want to be taken at your word and experience, but you still need to be aware of it because it exists. Even in rooms where other women hold the power, don't underestimate the behaviour that they may have needed to deploy to get there. In rooms where you hold more power, or power, clout, whatever you want to call it, intentionally give space. In rooms where you hold less power, speak clearly, be respectful, and know how to best approach your audience. So what specific keywords can you say that will get through to them best? What are they afraid of? What are they excited by? How can you get them on your side? While it's super heavy on gendered language, I just wanted to include this little screenshot here of Deborah Tannen's 6 contrasts around conflict. Knowing where you sit is actually really helpful for learning how to navigate these kinds of conversations as well. But it's very, very heavily gendered. I apologise. As a rather justice-sensitive individual, it's a pretty big personal challenge to maintain my sense of self, my integrity, while my sense of responsibility and duty is split amongst my game team and my direct reports. They're always first to me, no matter what. I will have their back. The wider company and its values and priorities, and my stakeholders. So anything from the publisher to the IP holder to the customer to my company again. That's a lot of things and desires to juggle. So, how do I do this? What would I recommend? Lead by example. Be careful about the message that you're sending with, this is actually a bit of a slide of do as I say, not as I do. But be careful about the message that you're sending when you're working overtime or while sick. I did that. Even though I am explicit about not expecting this from others, I know that actions speak louder than words. If I stop doing a certain behaviour, it means, or upholding certain standards, that means that I no longer expect this from the team. You cannot expect the team to behave in ways that you wouldn't yourself. Set boundaries. Be honest about what you will and won't do. Try to keep your focus and efforts to your area of influence. This is the hardest one for people like me who want to change the world. Focus on your area of influence. I know that I have my biggest influence among the game dev team, right? My lesson learned is to focus on that rather than railing against things that I don't have control over. Learn how to resolve conflict well. So remember to wait until you have both sides of a story before coming in heavy. That's something that I'm prone to do as well. I tend to want to jump right in there and solve the problem immediately. Take a breath, take a minute, step back, hear both sides. Make sure that you've got the full picture. Shit should roll uphill. So what I'm basically saying here is don't take things out on your team. If something's wrong, take it up higher. Thanks. Don't punish downwards. Basically, don't be Denethor, I guess. And maintaining integrity and justice again, you're responsible for everything. The team sees by example that they're safe to make their own mistakes when you can own your own mistakes as well. The team feels safe when they can be in this environment too. They feel well represented, and they'll organise themselves better and problem solve better when they have psychological safety to talk about their problems and fix them autonomously. If you can, protect the team from being directly finger pointed at by influential people. or defensive behaviour will follow, and that will just completely fuck up problem solving for the next, I don't know, however many years. As soon as people get into this defensive and very protective mindset, collaboration and creative problem solving gets really hard. Collate wider feedback from those influential people and distribute it with care or context where you think it will help and not hinder. There's no point giving feedback that people already know about. Choose your battles wisely. Not every hill can be your hill to die on, and you can't fight every Balrog, although I feel like this is a pretty good choice for Gandalf to be at. Use anger as a device, though. It's a hard skill to learn, especially if you're femme presenting. This effect is multiplied if you're also a person of colour. Unfortunately, men who are leaders are respected for showing their anger. They're strong, they're decisive, they're credible. Femmes are judged pretty harshly when we show anger or frustration. We're bitches, we're nags, we're shrill, we're difficult. I did actually include references to studies for all of these things, just because it's on the last page. Just want to make sure you know that I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. And I have to do this. It's kind of annoying that I have to say that. Like, don't worry, I've got references, but here we are. Our anger as women is frequently dismissed as hysteria or melodrama rather than what it is, which is an emotion that occurs when something is wrong. And that's what it is for everybody, no matter how you identify. If women give in to the narrative that angry women are unlikable, we risk betraying ourselves and we turn our anger inward and we stay quiet and we kind of get passive aggressive. This is particularly difficult to navigate if you have specific genres of neurodiversity, I guess, whereas, maybe you're prone to speaking your mind, or maybe you struggle to read the emotions of others. It's also so true that even in justice, men who show anger in closing statements are perceived as powerful, whereas women who close with anger are seen as shrill. So it literally impacts how much time someone gets in jail, this mentality. And yeah, because I'm not just an angry woman, I actually included references at the end. I am no man. You can't always stab people when you're angry, but you tell them, babe. So here's what I have learned to do. In the moment, pick your battles wisely, of course, but things are going to piss you off. The team's going to piss you off, leadership's going to piss you off, situations out of your control are going to piss you off. Count down from 10 before speaking. Use I statements rather than you statements, so don't come in with a you, fucking you. Take the walk around the block when you need to. And if you aren't calm enough to be in a space with others, just acknowledge that. Remove yourself. Don't abandon people. Get things set up, but just remove yourself from a situation where you're going to do more harm than good. And record situations factually with dates and accuracy. Avoid emotions in this so that you can pull up instances quickly in the future to help mitigate future issues. Here's the longer-term way to use anger as a device. Obviously, avoid passive-aggressive behaviour. Internalise anger that is not expressed comes out like this, and it's just generally unhelpful. Talk it out with a trusted friend or colleague, preferably of similar status. So this is not meant to be a bitching sesh. This is meant to be productive. You're meant to be able to assess a situation with this person and assess any blind spots that you have. Triangulation is where you pit people against each other, and that just increases conflict. So try not to do that. Do use your anger to impact positive change, though. Don't rage to vent to the person that you want to change, that you want to change things. Ensure that there's actually just a positive change that you're advocating for and that you know what it is. You can come up with options, but you should know what positive difference you're trying to make. Once you've collected yourself, you can still appear angry and provide well-reasoned arguments. It's best not to feel angry when you're bringing these up, though. If you're a woman, though, do remember that even affected anger may still shut the ears of the people that you're trying to talk to. And instead of focusing on who is at fault and trying to get them to change, focus on your actual sphere of influence. And then if you can, let it go. Do as I say, not as I do. Accidentally supported a pattern I was angry about. So our team needed more resources, particularly senior programmers and designers. The reasonable pushback was that Game Studio was actually hitting targets and that we were doing fine. So no matter what my project health reports were saying, I was told that I was doing great and not to worry so much. You're being a bit dramatic, chill out. I was losing my damn mind. In an effort to cover salaries and hit milestones, I'd actually been adjusting the roadmaps and plans and getting the team to hit critical points for our milestone deliverables to ensure that we'd hit those deadlines and get paid, while hoping that the resource gap would actually be honoured and that we'd be able to catch up later. This just meant that we were building up essential foundational work and our tech debt was getting out of control. But that wasn't visible on the top surface. What could I have done instead? These are just some options. They're not all great choices, but they provide me with agency in changing my behaviour rather than desperately hoping that someone else is going to get it or change their behaviour instead. I could have stuck to the plan and the essential work and let a milestone fail. It would be honest, based on us literally not having the resources in the map that we had agreed on. This would have indicated that those resources were critical. I could have cut features in the project to adjust for the existing pace and enacted it, rather than warning leadership that, hey, soon we're going to need to cut drastically. Hey, soon we're going to need to cut, no, seriously, this time. Soon we will need to cut drastically. And I could have communicated more openly with the team about how many underlying issues we weren't addressing in the meantime and worked with them to cut out more technically complex things. What I really want everyone to work on, though, is creating a culture of collaboration. Clearly defined roles reduce conflict. These two aren't competing for the same skill set ever, apart from how many kills, I guess. But you're never going to see Gimli grabbing Legolas's bow and arrow. Muddying these means that there's more mental effort and complex politics involved in who does what and why, and you start to get that weird defensive behaviour again where people get really clutchy about specific things that they want to work on. Trust the people closest to the problem. They have the best ideas on the solution. Secrets. Man, that would have been a great opportunity to pop Frodo up on the board again. Make sure people always feel like they can come to you. Don't be a cop. And create multidisciplinary pods that have more autonomy. If you have given people the opportunity to really get on board with the vision and understand it all together, this works really, really effectively. People do fantastic work when they are on the same page as you. Here are some resources. There are some references. There's many more. You can go look it up. And thank you very much. This is a quote that I really love. It's a letter from Tolkien to John Izzard, and it, to me, is just so much the story of back from Mordor to the Shire. I loved it with an intensity of love that was a kind of nostalgia reversed. It was a kind of double coming home, the effect on me of all these meadows. Thanks. I hope you play Tales of the Shire. I don't think I've left any time for questions at all. I think I've got like 1 minute. So I'll say hi to people outside if you've got questions. But thank you very much for coming.